Again, welcome. The department, in partnership with Louisiana State Police, the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Planning, GOSEP, and the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools is hosting the third annual summit to share best practices around school safety and emergency preparedness. In addition to hosting the School Safety Summit for the past 2 years, the department has collaborated with a number of agencies to provide guidance, support, and funding to school systems to improve school safety, emergency preparedness, and recovery. Among those efforts have been the development of a hurricane preparedness playbook, behavioral threat assessment and management training, funding for automated external defibrillators, AEDs, and funding through the Stronger Connections grant to harden school campuses. Of course, none of this would be possible without the full support of Dr. Cade Brumley, State Superintendent of Education, whom I'll invite to say a few words. Dr. Brumley.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Can you see me today?
Yes, sir. We got you.
Okay, thank you. Look, thanks for helping put this on. I want to thank everyone for joining the School Safety Summit. We know that we're doing it virtual this year, which is a little different than the last couple of years, but we felt like it might be more convenient for some of you. There's nothing more important to us than our responsibility around school safety. We've made some really good progress around hardening perimeters, around other options that local school leaders felt needed. We were able to do some funding there. So a lot of good progress there. But most importantly, I think the progress that we've made around further cultivating relationships between school officials, law enforcement, emergency response personnel, mental health professionals has been really productive. And so I hope that can continue as we move forward. For us as a state agency, we're really thankful for the partnerships that we have with those same type of agencies. And so hopefully you appreciate today's event. Hopefully you learn a little more at today's event, and we'll be in an even better position as we go into this upcoming school year. So thanks for being with us today. And I'll turn this back over to Mike Como. Mike.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Appreciate your support. The School Safety Act of 2023 placed a number of requirements on state agencies, schools, and school systems related to school safety and emergency preparedness. For the next 2 days, we will be focused on these requirements, but our goal is for you to obtain guidance, resources, and contacts to support you in protecting your schools and communities. Most importantly, the School Safety Act established a Center for Safe Schools within GOSEP. Travis Thompson was recently named director of the center and will get the day officially started. Travis is a Louisiana product of Benton High School in Bossier Parish, an educator with over 20 years of experience. He has served as SAT chairperson, 504 coordinator, homebound coordinator, instructional curriculum coach, IEP compliance facilitator, SPED Act 8033 advisor, athletics academic coach, was Coach of the Year for boys soccer in 2012, and District Teacher of the Year in 2016. He experienced a career change in 2019 by joining GOSEP. However, he was the natural progression and expansion of his legacy in education. Travis is a son, a husband of 20 plus years, and a father of 2 beautiful daughters who are avid soccer players. He enjoys watching his daughters play, shooting basketball, and riding motorcycles with his brothers. Travis.
Good morning and thank you. Can everyone hear me at this time?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you
I can hear you.
are you also able to see the slides?
Not seeing them yet, Travis.
Okay. Can you see me?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, despite the technical difficulties, we'll just get down to speaking directly to you, the participants this morning. I do appreciate Mike and the Department of Education. That was awesome. That was kind of better than pregame walkout music. I don't know how I'm gonna stay in my seat at this point. But on behalf of the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, as well as the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools, it is an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you today. It's a delicate time, but critical time in Louisiana surrounding the topic of school safety. Our state, along with the nation, must provide safe and learning environments for its students and safe working environments for its faculty and staff. So again, it's an honor to address you as the leaders in preparing and protecting the future of our great state. As we approach back to school season, school safety remains a top priority in education settings across the country. Louisiana Center for Safe Schools was established in June of 2023 by the School Safety Act. The creation of this statewide school safety center placed within the Governor's Office of Homeland Security allowed for oversight, leadership, and increased collaboration. This allowed Louisiana to create a premier center, building capacity and capability for all school safety programs. GOSEP and LCSS continues to focus on developing a comprehensive all hazards planning and training model. The intent is to maintain national school safety standards and best practices while integrating with the ongoing local efforts. The U.S. Department of Education's 10 recommendations for improving school safety continue to provide the foundation for the efforts we seek to anchor within our state. While many of these protocols are relatively new to education, the discussion of how to keep schools safe is not. We have seen significant strides in providing more safe and secure schools across our state, and many are captured in the annual school safety report. And I commend each of you in attendance today for your dedication and support in the enormous amount of growth and resiliency that I've witnessed. As stated by Mr. Como and Dr. Brumley, the Louisiana legislative session of 2023 was historic for our state's school safety efforts. With the passing of Senate Bill 207, the School Safety Act established new mandates and expanded school safety requirements for the 2023-24 school year. Emergency notification and anonymous reporting systems, bleed kits, active shooter drills, drills during transition times, even district threat assessment teams were all new requirements, but they are not new to most preparedness planning conversations. The whole community collaborative approach is further defined by recommending critical stakeholders necessary for effective prevention, mitigation, planning, response, and recovery. Every facet of emergency preparedness. The same philosophy is used in the School Safety Act as it established the School and Nonprofit Security Commission. This approach is based largely off of lessons learned and after action reviews, plans, drills, exercises, initiatives, and statewide resources where something significant was missing because someone significant was not seated at the planning table to sound off with the expertise on their capability to meet their responsibility in the plan. We cannot afford to continue to function in this manner. I urge you to find a seat at the table for your local subject matter experts. Technology can never be a substitute for strong relationships, so let's get them to the table. The year of 2024 has been extremely exciting and fast-paced here at GOSEP. In January, Governor Jeff Landry took office and immediate action to elevate community preparedness and emergency response. He named Jock Thibodeau as Executive Director of GOSEP.
This lady gonna get on my nerve.
Director Thibodeau then built an entire section within the agency to serve as school safety subject matter experts. They work to meet fast approaching legislative deadlines, explore and manage new initiatives, and work to secure additional funding for projects. I was named director of the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools in late January. I received the governor's vision and the director's orders. And from March to June, school safety collaborations were planned and intensified. Partnerships were explored, solidified, and expanded. Products were initiated, developed, delivered, and refined. And today, you are offered sessions to learn how these products will assist you in securing your campuses and managing crisis should it arise. In February, Stevenson Disaster Management Institute partnered with GOSEP to develop dashboards to provide a common operating view of each. A common operating view. Oh. In February, Stevenson Disaster Management Institute partnered with GOSEP to develop dashboards to provide a common operating view of each campus statewide. In March, the data call questionnaire was sent out to all schools requesting specific school safety details. Just under 65% of all schools responded. From my days as a classroom teacher, I know that 65% is better than 0. It gives you something to build on. But I can definitely say that we still have a lot of work to do within our state. Your responses will provide accountability, the ability to expand effective initiatives, and baseline data necessary to apply for federal funds. So your participation in the questionnaire is critical to our statewide efforts. In April, the state-funded school and nonprofit security grant program opened, allowing local school systems and nonprofits to compete for funding for physical security projects. There were over 300 applicants for this funding opportunity. 140 projects were approved and funded in early June of this year, and an additional $5 million was requested and approved from the state for this coming school year. On May 1st, the center provided the annual school safety report for Governor Landry, the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Senate Committee on Education, and the House Committee on Education. Significant growth can be seen in comparison to HR 218 of 2022 and the Legislative Auditor's Report from December of 2023. Again, we feel that the state of Louisiana is on the appropriate course forward and making strides necessary to provide the most safe and secure campuses for our students, faculty, staff, and communities. On May 9th, the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools provided training on school-based active shooter exercises as requested by the State Emergency Professionals Association. Multiple federal, state, and local partners engaged in modular learning curriculums. It was a fun and exciting time. We had an enormous amount of support. Several of our federal partners like U.S. Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. We had a number of school districts to also participate. We also had the Sheriff's Association in attendance and providing guidance and feedback, several school resource officers and their supervisors, superintendents, principals, parish OSEP directors. We had counseling services and members from Louisiana Department of Health and Office of Behavioral Health. We also had the Louisiana Emergency Response Network to speak specifically about trainings that they were providing in the communities and the impacts that they have and how all of these different components can be drilled within a school-based active shooter scenario. This exercise is a new requirement in the legislation for the School Safety Act of 2023. And so we wanted to provide some guidance and feedback as far as what that engagement should look like. We began with the first module focused on prevention. Prevention largely encompasses threat assessment and behavioral threat assessment, whether that be physical or behavioral. And so having a better understanding of how that plays into the path forward and things to look for and areas to refine in your emergency operation drill, it was important to the responders to be able to sound off about what that looks like to them and how they will be able to assist schools in making sure that it's effective in the drill of the exercise. We also focused on addressing some inconsistencies. There are a lot of different forms of active shooter training that are available. And so we were able to clarify through some of the key responders that the alert training for law enforcement and the CRAZE training for civilian response would be the basis for our state. We understand as educators and as any professional that practice, drilling, and exercises is what leads us to proficiency. And so we continue to encourage the schools and encourage our community stakeholders to make themselves readily available and engage in the practice and drills so that they can become more proficient, to understand what inconsistencies or lacking capabilities may exist for certain situations and scenarios. It's good to play devil's advocate and put yourself into a mindset that will kind of challenge what the normal basis is, but also within the exercise that we provided, we linked them to federal national best practices and standards. And so DHS CISA was able to provide guidance in their system-based approach, even from the outside inside of addressing your physical security, and then just the mindset that is actually, I guess, more beneficial to having stakeholders engage in every level of the drill and exercise and response to really own their component and speak to their level of expertise. We adopted standards, provided resources, and focused on every effective component: assessment, plans, and the exercises for schools. These are additional resources from DHS CISA, and we've also provided these resources on the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools website. The Louisiana Center for Safe Schools is committed to continued growth and support and to partner agencies as well as schools as we look to the fiscal 2025 year. What has been achieved in the last quarter of fiscal year 24 is just the beginning. The center will continue to consider its alignment with statutory requirements and determine the degree of effectiveness in increasing the safety within our schools. We work to identify areas of improvement and implementing change from these reviews, and it'll be a continuous process. Creating safe learning environments requires a collective effort at all levels of government and within the school systems to include students, communities, and families. By continuing to work together, committed to providing the resources needed, we will exceed mission requirements and make Louisiana schools a safe place for both educators and students. The center is dedicated to the safety of every student in Louisiana, and in collaboration with our communities and local stakeholders, we will continue to monitor the ever-fluid environment that is school safety. In accordance with the School Safety Act, legislative policies, future directives, and best practice, Louisiana Center for Safe Schools will continue to make data-based decisions in order to further its mission of providing safe and conducive learning environments for students, faculty, staff across the state. If I have a moment, I want to make sure that I'm able to speak to a slide that may have been missed a few moments ago. So the Commission on Schools and Nonprofit Security will be, yes, the oversight for the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools. Much of what I mentioned as far as the after action reviews of plans, exercises, and drills, that kind of led to this understanding that it's necessary to have all of the responding agencies at the planning table to speak to their capability and their responsibility and clarify exactly what that looks like in providing drills and exercises or necessary crisis response to schools.
Muted, yes. Yeah. And video, no, turn them off.
It is extremely important that we have members from these agencies at the planning table. And so for the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools, it is our intent to make sure that we engage with all of these critical stakeholders before moving forward with any recommendations or any mandates for schools in regards to school safety. We've tried to be whole community minded. We understand there sometimes it could be too many chefs in the kitchen. However, based on, I guess, the dedication of each of the professionals listed in their agencies and organizations, we all have the same mission in mind, and that's doing what's best for our communities and what's doing best for our schools. So continuing to be willing to collaborate. Sometimes it's kind of scary to take that first step. But we assure you here at the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools that you are not alone in this effort. This is something that we are dedicated to. We are beginning to ramp up in staff the school safety section in GOSEP to be able to provide additional resources and even boots on the grounds within your local areas. So I urge you here today to put on your thinking caps, sharpen your pencils, be prepared to take notes and willing to engage. The more you ask questions, the more prepared you will be for the conversations that are necessary within your communities. And so in close, again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I thank you for all of the hard work that you've done at the local level and state level, on any level, in making sure that we have the safest school campuses possible within our state. And I look forward to working with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Travis. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in chat. We'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, seeing no questions, we will drop a link in the chat to evaluate the Center for Safe Schools session. So as you see that link, please do an evaluation for that last session. All right, thank you. The next session will start in about 6 minutes. We'll start at 8:30 with school site assessments. We'll take a pause. Are the residents?
Hey, Paul, when you have a moment, you go ahead and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and you can kind of pull up your screen and get ready for your session. I'm looking at your notes, Paul. There you go.
Got
So go to the first, your first slide. It looks like you're ready to rock.
The first
This
topic
meeting
for
is being recorded.
the first topic for today is school site assessments. Often the priority around school safety has been the development of emergency operation plans, certainly a key factor in school safety, in which you will hear about later. However, in order to develop a comprehensive school-based crisis response plan, facilities and operational procedures must first be assessed. We are fortunate to have with us today Paul Toops from Louisiana State Police. Paul is a retired state trooper and has returned to state police to work with school safety for the past 4 years and has over 31 years of law enforcement experience. While at state police, Paul worked in numerous sections: narcotics, the detective division, the training academy, was on the state police SWAT team for 17 years, and was Governor Jindal's bodyguard for 4 years. Upon retirement, Paul worked for then Attorney General Jeff Landry, then as Director of Enforcement for Louisiana Alcohol and Tobacco Control. He now conducts physical security assessments for schools throughout the state. Paul just received a certification from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glen Cove, Georgia, through the Office of Homeland Security in the Physical Security Training Program. Welcome, Paul.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. I appreciate everybody tuning in on this Wednesday morning. We're going to go over hardening of your schools. Several years back, about a year and a half, I'd say. Well, let me back up. 2012, Louisiana State Police had created a physical assessment for schools. Captain Mark Richards was the basic creator of this. In 2018, when we applied, the state police applied for 2 federal grants. This is when they went out and did the physical assessment on all the schools in 2018. They used the same form. About a year and a half ago in 2022, we started working on updating that particular assessment form. And with GOSEP, Travis Thompson, Mike McKee from CISA, and Mark Richards, who had since retired and then was working for NCBRT, and myself, we made some modifications to what we are currently using now, which is a culmination of best practices from all over the country to create this form. And this is what I use currently when we do the assessments. So who do you need to contact to get an assessment for your school? Well, that's going to be me, and this is my information. You just send me an email. I will take it on a first come, first served basis. I will coordinate. We are currently, State Police is working on trying to get some assistance because I'm currently the only one doing it. I do have a couple of retired troopers that help in some areas of the state. The department is trying to assist and create some positions so I can cover other parts of the state, so I'm not traveling as much, which helps me immensely from not having, with 1,700 schools and me traveling all over, it is very time consuming for me to try and get to it. And we want to give you a good product where we can have retired troopers or retired law enforcement work in your district. And that way you'll have a definite point of contact when you reach out to have your assessments done. Next step, we want you to establish a school safety team. And this would be a school safety coordinator. If you don't have one, some of these larger school districts have a person that is on the staff that is designated for that. A lot of smaller ones have coordinators that do multiple things, from maintenance and IT, and then they throw them into being a safety security coordinator. If you don't have one, then you need to look into seeing and trying to get a school safety coordinator that can attend conferences and understand the safety and security side for the school. Your school district facility manager, or your maintenance department. When walking through, a lot of times we find things that aren't working properly, and it gives another set of eyes looking at it, and they can start working on fixing those things. Numerous times they've done work orders while we were walking through just to fix doors or locks or hinges on certain parts of the school. The SRO over the district or at the school, we would like to have them to walk through with us. And then your administration for the school, whether it's the principal, assistant principal, or a designee from there. And then your school district GOSEP your district GOSEP or EOC school representative. This way we have 5 members of a team for your district and or your school. And it takes that team approach where we can have all these sets of eyes and each one that has their specialty as we walk through the school to do this assessment. This is the physical security protection strategy. This is from CISA, and it takes a layered approach. You look at it and see that on the outer, the green ring is a perimeter security, which is talking about fencing, barriers, lighting, signage, and security forces. The next is middle security, which is the yellow ring, access control, intrusion detection systems, camera systems, key accountability, protective seal accountability, and physical security deterrence measures. The inner circle or internal security, which is the red, this goes into a lot more of your procedures, talking about meetings, things about background checks, and then actually doing your security exercises. And then, of course, it says security inspection, which is this assessment. All right. One of the approaches that is being used is called CPTED. And what is CPTED? CPTED is a crime prevention through environmental design. This is a concept that is using your environment to protect your school. And it can be a lot more cost effective instead of putting large walls and using concrete and bricks and things of that nature. It's using landscaping to be able to do that. So this CPTED definition includes physical and social management and law enforcement recommendations that seek to affect positive human behavior as people interact with the environment. The environment is inclusive of the people, their physical and social surroundings, and how people behave and act. So this will manipulate access to your school, but in doing so, as people are moving, you'll see as slides later, it also prevents vehicles from being able to get onto or ramming into your school. So the crime prevention or CPTED design, this has 4 points to it. You have natural surveillance, natural access controlled, territoriality, and maintenance. All right, so let's go over natural surveillance. Fundamentals of this premise is that criminals do not wish to be observed. They don't want to be seen. They usually try and sneak up. If you see them, then they will be more likely to run away, hopefully, using surveillance or placing legitimate eyes on the street, increasing the perceived risk of the offenders. So can I see and can others see me? That is what they're looking at. So if you're able, as you can see in the slide, if there's more visibility or being able to see from windows, using windows to be able to look out, you're able to see what's on the street as it approaches your school, from whatever the environment. If there's fences that you have around, they have to jump over a fence. There's a distance in between that fence getting to your school. But if you make things more visible, or the use of cameras, being able to see, then you are less likely to have somebody or have an intruder onto your campus. We look at the slide on the left. You can see that the brush on this, this isn't a house, a school, this is a house, but it just makes it easier to show. The landscaping on it has not been maintained. If you look at the one on the right, you can see that now it is easy to see if somebody is trying to jump the fence, if somebody's trying to approach this, it looks like an apartment complex, But if it was to be a school, it would have the same concept to it, where you are trying to manage the amount of people, and by using the visibility, you can see through the windows, you can see on the ground floors, you can see to the street. The one on the left, you cannot. Natural access control. Natural access control relies on doors, fences, shrubs, and other physical elements to keep unauthorized persons out of a particular place if they do not have a legitimate reason for being there. So we take the sidewalks leading up to the school. This is just an aerial shot. You can see that it's not a straight shot. There's curvature, architectural design to this using shrubbery. So a vehicle would be less likely to be able to go through this if they were to try and get onto your campus and run into the building, or people don't have a direct line of walking straight up to the school or a mass of people. They would have to split up and go around so you can control the amount of people that are approaching. This is one of the local schools. You can see in the background, there's bollards that are protecting so vehicles can't drive up. You've got shrubbery and bushes that are limiting a large number of people just to walk. They would usually try and walk on the sidewalk, and you're controlling that movement of people onto your campus. Same here. You can see that their bushes are trimmed nicely, and this is the walk area up to a school in New Orleans, but you don't have a direct line of approach. You have to go around things, which then allows for them to use their cameras and monitor and see people as they approach. This is a school up in North Louisiana. Very hard for a vehicle to get up to the office. The windows to the right on the elevated portion is the actual office to the school. And you see that there are barriers. They used bricks, there's steps, there's a ramp to get up there, but this is limiting the access to the main office where you have to approach it by foot. With the natural access controls, using signage to direct visitors to appropriate building entrances and parkings, as you see on the right-hand side. Keep left if you want to go to these things for this school. Go to the right if you want to go. Giving direction. You want to have the concept for people to understand is 99% of the people will follow the instructions. It's the 1%, the bad guy, that we're looking for, that allows your SRO or your administration to see if somebody is in a place that they're not supposed to. So with the approach of having signs at the front of the school, leading people as they come from the street onto your campus, this helps to move them where you want them to go. Visitors, please go enter in this parking area. Visitors, park here. You have assigned spots for the visitors. Visitors, please report to the main office to check in. Well, you'd be surprised at how many schools I go to that don't even tell you where the main office is. Everybody assumes where the main office is. There's no signage that says this is the main office, so I know where to go. Some schools have multiple entry points that could look like the actual main entry. So we want to give them signage that directs them to that for that natural access control. This school here uses fencing to actually limit the access into the grass area. So you have to basically follow the fence, which is followed on the pavement, and that will direct you to the main office. And it tells you visitors, parent pickup, and deliveries are done at this school. Territoriality is people's naturally protect a territory that they feel is their own and have a certain respect for the territory of others. Clear boundaries between public and private areas achieved by using physical elements such as fences, pavements, pavement treatments, art signs, good maintenance, and landscaping are all ways to express ownership. It's a very small school. How about that? But on the high risk on the left, it has minimal septet measures being used. As you can see, you can approach this a little schoolhouse. There's nothing blocking anything from the approach. We go to the right-hand side, which is a robust CPTED method, making it a very low risk. And I'll start from the top right using dense vegetation. You can use as natural fencing. Instead of actually paying for fencing, you use shrubbery to use as your natural fencing. Going to plants that can be used to create a natural barrier while adding an overall aesthetics, which is in the front middle. You've got lighting around the edges of the pavement, which makes it more difficult to use the cover of darkness to hide. As we move over to the left, an indirect path to show the front door purpose and intent upon entry and exit. And then you've got a simple gate to create a barrier that forces people into a single entry point, which is one of the things that Dr. Brumley had mentioned with the hardening of schools. We always want to, and that's the approach we want. And doing this is having single point entry at your school. Placing intentional landscaping features to create obstacles to prevent them from easy approach or escape. And then shrubbery on the front gives a little bit easier viewing, not into your school. And then maintenance. This is related to the neighborhood sense of pride of place. In territorial reinforcement, the more dilapidated an area, the more likely it is to attract unwanted activities. The maintenance and images and the image of an area can be a major impact on whether it becomes targeted. So if you take the old scientist, James Wilson and George Keeling introduced the broken window theory in 1982. Theory suggests that visible signs of disorder, vandalism, and misbehavior, such as unrepaired broken window, lead to more disorder, vandalism, and misbehavior. And an increase in this can lead to the increase in both property and violent crimes. That's most basic, the CPTED concept of maintenance means that the property owner should care for their property. Now, most schools have maintenance or landscaping, but if it looks like nobody cares, then others will treat it that way. If it looks abandoned, then why not should somebody break into it? So one of the things, recommendations on maintenance is keeping up with all your repairs, removing graffiti quickly and completely, take care of the lawn, garden, or any other of the landscaping, removing trash and other debris, replacing burned out light bulbs on the exterior lights, and taking pride in the overall appearance of your school. Ways of doing that, you can see I have slides, kids picking up, custodian cleaning off graffiti off of a school, mowing, keeping up with the shrubs, weed eating, making sure. A lot of times, I go out to a school and some of the things on the checklist talk about shrubbery being a certain height and maintained, and it's part of the checklist, and it's there for that reason to let you know that, hey, certain things need to be maintained. If the school looks nice, which most schools do, but it's just the little things that people pay attention to, that if it doesn't look, if there's lights that are out, that's more likely that somebody's going to be able to approach in the evening time. If you don't have lights in your parking lot, or they're broken, and you want to try and get those fixed. Grass growing up around it, if it looks like it's abandoned, then they will treat it like it said. This is a school, and you can see the landscaping on it. And as this kid's going to it, but the landscaping's low, very well maintained, and looks like it has been taken care of. All right, so getting into the CISA model, this is what we're going to talk about now, is perimeter security. All right, fencing, barriers, lighting, signage, and security forces. So now we go into also using the CISA principle or method. This is the assessment. So this is actually the very first question on the state police's physical assessment. And it goes into school grounds are properly fenced approximately 6 to 8 feet to prevent unauthorized entry. So you want to have fencing that meets that. If you don't like the galvanized steel because it looks like a prison fence, there's an option. It is not a prison fence. You're not putting a fence up at a school that's making the school appear to be a prison. In previous presentations, I have put fences up for prisons, and I'm not doing it in this one, but I still want to touch base or talk about it a little bit. And that's usually, kids. If you're talking about that, your parents are giving that persona to the kids. Kids really don't even think of it that way until it's brought up to them. But the only time they really even notice that there's a fence is when they're outside playing and they kick a ball or throw a ball and it goes over the fence. And then they go, oh, my kids go to school in Baton Rouge, and I've asked them about the fence, and they didn't even notice there was a fence around the school. So, but then I asked the next question is, do you feel safe? And that is what you need to be asking. Ask the students if they feel safe on that campus. And if they are agreeing and saying, yes, they are, then you've got a good learning environment. If they do not, then ask for input, see what they think. And it's supposed to be part of the process when you're doing your emergency operation plans annually. This is a metal tubing fence around a school. Aesthetically, it looks very nice. And I'm just going to have some pictures that are going to show you different ways of fencing that can secure your school. This one having a gate to it. A lot of the fencing that I see in the when I do these assessments have that little horseshoe gate, and then they put a lock on it. And so if you have a critical incident that occurs, or you're trying to evacuate, whether it be a fire or an active shooter, and you need to get actually off of the school's property, and you're going out to the play area or the large yard football area, and you get to that fence and it's got a lock and a horseshoe on it. So I recommend that you try and get something like this with a push bar, maybe not to that magnitude, but depending on what type of fence that you have. If it's a galvanized steel fence, then get with your fence company and have them have a push bar, and then they can have a padlock or a keypad lock on the other side. Runs with a battery, and usually the battery has about a 5-year life. Electronic gates. This will help reduce the amount of vehicle access during operating hours, and of course in the evening time. But you open this up whatever time you allow vehicles onto your campus. When school's about to let in or let out, you would have it opened up. But once this first school bell rings, you should have these gates closed and have a camera and a push button camera that will access the main office, and they will be able to, you want to be able to control that access. Know who's on your campus. If you have a fire, somebody came on and they're doing maintenance work, or they're dropping off food or beverages, you're still accountable for them on your campus. And so you need to make sure you know who's on there. A lot of these that don't have this, they're dropping stuff off and nobody even knows they're even on their campus. Just showing you other forms of electronic gates. Going into the next part of the questionnaire for the assessment, there's one clearly marked and designated entrance for visitors. Signs are posted for visitors to report to the main office through a designated entrance. Do all exterior doors have signage requiring visitors to report to the main office to sign in and obtain an ID? Just showing you some signage that's out there, very cost effective. Some of these I pull off of Amazon, you'll see in a minute, but you can order these to direct those people on your campus. Another picture just showing you of signage that's out there. Simple signs, besides having it on the main office, sometimes the way your parking is set up might not bring you straight up to the main office, and it might be around the corner. So sometimes you might have to get directional signage that will direct the visitor to where the main office is. Because if they don't know, they're going to wander around, and you don't want people wandering on your campus. Do you have clear student drop-off and pickup areas that are clearly defined at your school? Simple signage that you can put, letting parents know this is where they need to go. You don't want buses and car drop-off in the same area. If you are doing them in the same area, hopefully you're doing them at different times. What you don't want is 2 buses and then several cars in between. It's a bus drop-off and then a student drop-off if you're using the same area. If not, a lot of schools have it split where on one side of the campus is going to be student drop-off and carpool, and then the other side is the bus drop-off. You want to let people know when they're on your campus, signage indicating surveillance cameras are present and recording. Just a simple sign to put up there, letting people know as they approach the front of your school. Now we're going into middle security, which is part of that yellow area in the middle ring of the CISA model. Access control, intrusion detection, camera systems, key accountability, and physical security deterrence measures. All right, here's 2 slides. These are ideal, and all schools should be having these at your front entrance. I went to a school to do an assessment in the last 2 weeks, and I walked up. The front door was unlocked and open. I know it's summertime, but there's not a lot of people there. But I walked in, and there was nobody in the front office. They had stepped out for a second. But if that door is locked, then there can't be somebody on your campus. So I highly recommend these types of push buttons with a speaker. Hey, identify who you are with some signage, press button for service and show your ID. They hold their ID up to the camera. You capture that. Can the person stay out there? Is it a little bit inconvenience for them to stay outside until you find out if that is the person that is allowed to pick that child up? Yes. There's no problem with that. It's an inconvenience for the parent a little bit, but it is all about the safety and security of the kids. And you can tell them that. I don't see why anybody would argue over this. I found this is in a Louisiana school, and for the safety of our students and staff, all visitors must present a driver's license or an ID. Parents and guardians must also present their ID to check out a student. So you're spelling it all out for them. This is taped on the front door. All visitors must sign in and out with the front office. Spells it all out. This is a wonderful sign. That's why I took a picture of it and to put it in the presentation. This is just another camera with a speaker to it with the button at the bottom. Next to it is key card entry. That way your staff, instead of hitting the button to gain access, they have a lanyard with a access card that gives them access to your campus. This is at a school in Louisiana that has this SLOJ keyless entry. They have a key fob, a little small fob, and they put these on all of their doors through the campuses of all their schools. And so I thought it was a great idea. I love the concept of it. Makes it a lot easier to gain access instead of trying to fidget for a key to unlock, especially in a critical incident. If there's gunshots going off, it's very hard to be able to get into. That was one of the things in the Parkland. The teacher was very calm and in control as he was trying to get these kids back into the classroom. It just took too long for him to find his key to get in if he had had access with a key fob or key card. This is an actual school in Louisiana also. Kids come off the bus. You can see on the right-hand side, midway up is the little black box. They swipe their card, their student ID, and that allows them to pass through this fencing, this gate. And that accounts for them, lets them know each kid, and it only works per swipe. So you're able to control the access of and know who is arriving on your campus. This is for the bus drop area. So all of them go through there, and then you can see the steps that lead up, and then there's a magometer, and then all kids proceed through a magometer to make sure that they're safe and secure at the school and no weapons are brought on campus. Ways to tie in multiple buildings with fencings, security screening with doors and gates. If your campus is an open campus, which means that you don't have a single point entry, meaning multiple buildings. If you've got 4 or 5 buildings that are spread away from the main building where the main office is, older schools tend to be that way. You need to have fencing to secure from building to building. So if you're looking at the CISA model that I showed you earlier with the outer perimeter, and then we get to the middle perimeter. And this part is linking building to building, is that middle layer that doesn't allow somebody to walk up onto your campus if you don't have a perimeter fence, or they have to jump that fence to get to, but then they have to a second layer to do it. So you're just adding layers to prevent people getting on your campus. But this is some fencing here that's linking 2 school buildings together. This was a wall. This tan colored brick wall is solid going, and this is an open area that the school just decided to go ahead and put a glass door, and you can see the little black box for the key card entry to gain access into the school with a push bar to meet fire code to get out. Very, very ingenious way to fill a hole where people were just walking through and onto campus. This is a screen area that is to prevent people from gaining access. Kids are going from one building to the next. This is actually a ballistic screen, which means that it is able to withstand gunfire. This is that same screen showing the doors and the way that they have access. That is the passageway from one building, school building, to the next. Student and staff controlling the movement of people on your campus. Student and staff are issued parking. Again, these are questions that come from our assessment. Parking, sticker hang tags assigned. Obviously, if you are a middle school or elementary school, we're just looking to see if staff has this. If it's students for the high school, we will be asking that question. Do students have access to a parking area is restricted during arrival and dismissal? We don't want kids going back and forth during the middle of the day. A lot of schools have this policy in place. Pretty much most of them do. Very few don't limit the kids to it because they may leave early, but usually they have to talk to a teacher or get permission to go to their vehicle. So we try and prevent them from going to their vehicle during regular school hours. Staff and visitor parking spaces have been designated. So this is a simple thing that I literally pulled off of Amazon, but these are parking stickers or hang tags that you can get for faculty and for students for your campus. One of the other questions, ground floor windows, are they broken, cracked? We go and look for this. Went to a school recently that had several windows that were broken, had big, large cracks, both interior and exterior, and made notes of it to let them know. Walking with the maintenance person, they see this, might not have seen it at all, or nobody had reported it. They rely on somebody else to report it. So they were able to see this and make note of it, and they were going to work on it to get it done before school started. Locking hardware, is it working? Are windows fully functional? And then does Windows have security features, whether it's a wire mesh, that's the glass. A lot of doors to classrooms have that little wire mesh in it, or the security screen, which I showed you earlier, or a security laminate. This is a security screen. This is a school that is actually qualified for FEMA money to get these screens because they are an evacuation site for a hurricane. So they have to have these screens on their windows and to prevent any projectiles from shattering. Same school district. This is a ballistic laminate that is on this glass. It is mirrored so you can't see in, but you can see where they actually have visitors report to the front office. It's an exterior door, and they just were able to put signage on there. This is a entry point to a school. To the office. This is the office part where the administrator is going to receive people. I show you this because of the vulnerability that there's nothing protecting that person. They're not there. They're in the backdrop. But if you see a open area And that is actually where there's a gate, and you can kind of see the little thing hanging down as the gate drops. That's the electric part to get the gate to drop. I asked them how that would work. And if somebody came in shooting, the concept is they can hit the button and get behind that, and that will stop the shooter from gaining access. I asked them if it worked. They said, no, it doesn't work. So you spent the money for this. And I asked them when it did work, how long would it take for the gate to drop? And they said over 30 seconds. So if a school shooting takes 2 to 3 minutes is the average time, you're wasting valuable time. And I will show you ways that we would actually recommend that you have glass on the front and close that in. This is an actual entry to an elementary school. You come in the front door, they spruced it up, make it look very nice and child oriented, but this has got actually ballistic glass, and there's a little slide under to pass any paperwork that needs to be signed. And then you'll see the little door to the right. I'll give you a better view of it. So this is a holding area for visitors and parents. They can sit on the bench there while they wait for their child, but they had to prevent, because the way the school was designed, that you could walk straight in. You didn't have to stop at the office if you didn't want to. And so they closed that off with this glass, which has ballistic laminate on it, and it will not allow anybody to proceed unless it's buzzed in by somebody at the front office. Now I'm going to be showing you other schools that have taken the same measures. This is a solid brick, and then they enclosed it to where anybody that walks into the school, they stop here, and they can do all of their business, get whoever they want to check in and out, all done in this window. And visitors don't have to go anywhere else into any part of the school. I love this one here. You come into the little door that's in the back. You can slide stuff under. During COVID is when they came up with this design. A lot of parents or kids were forgetting their lunchbox. So the little metal thing that you see on the right-hand side closest, they would open it up and they could put lunchbox or anything that they needed to leave for the kid, but there was never contact. They closed that door. On the other side, they would grab that and call the kid. And so you didn't have any contact with it, but that is ballistic glass that is to prevent anybody from shooting at it. Another school that did the same thing, key card entry into the main office on the right-hand side. This is all ballistic glass and has little paper slides to go under the glass so nobody can point a gun at them. All right, and then talking about the internal security. Risk management procedures, like we talked about, going through the different parts of it, and we will go into more details. Crisis management plan and training, your school basic plan, school-based crisis response plan has 7 key elements: the organizing structure, communication system accountability, parent-student reunification, alternative location, equipment and supplies, and the aftermath and recovery plan. So you want to make sure that you have each one of these things in your emergency operations plan to be able to handle a crisis. God forbid if any of these things amount to a large scale, but you need to be able to have each one of these things. So in the questionnaire or the assessment, I send out a pre-assessment questionnaire, and I'm getting a lot of, at this particular part, talking about the annexes and drills. Sometimes they won't, the school won't answer the question. They'll do the first one, yes, we do, and then they leave the rest of them blank, which lets me know that no, you don't actually do it. So I wanted to put this into the slide so maybe people will understand a little bit better of what some of these things are. I'm not trying to insult, or this is not to insult anybody or say there's a lack of intelligence in this. I just want to catch all that explaining what these things are, because when I have asked the question, hey, you didn't check this off, well, I really didn't know what that meant. So I just want to go over these things. Functional annexes is one of the questions that we ask. To develop functional annexes for your school EOP. Identify and outline response, recovery, and other procedures that your school might need before, during, and after an incident, which is what I just outlined before. in the previous slide. Identify the title, goal, objectives, and course of action for those procedures. Example, your evacuation, shelter in place, reunification. Those are things that, are you doing these things? That's what that is. If you are, that's where you just check it off. So on the assessment form, we're able to put that into our form. Hazardous specific annexes. The question asks for that. Sometimes nobody will check nothing on there, or they'll check yes, and then I'll say, hey, can I see your emergency operations plan and show me this? And it's not in there. So you need to make sure that these things are things that you are working on and practicing. Hazard specific is basically, it's in there. It's emergency procedures for a specific hazard. They focus on special planning for needs generated by the one hazard. For example, your school may have hazardous specific annex that addresses a unique hazardous material that's on your school. This annex is, you have a plan in place on that specific thing. If you have a welding shop at your high school, you have certain hazardous materials that are on there. This will describe how you handle that if something is to leak or you have a problem with the gases that are part of that. Training coordination. Are you doing semi-annual drills? And, Travis had mentioned this earlier, required by law that one of the drills being during high traffic points during school day, i.e. class change or lunch period. You want to work on having that. I highly recommend when you're doing this, especially with the babies or the younger kids, elementary, do a tabletop, which is going to be the same thing that I talk about in the next one. Do a tabletop discussion, work through it with your staff first, and then do a dry run with staff on it during class change in a learning development day, and then walk the kids through it. Don't do it for time. Don't throw anything in there and say, without explaining, and then let the teachers go in and walk the kids through. Hey, if we're walking from the lunchroom going to our classroom and a critical incident occurs and we call for a lockdown, what are we going to do? Let them think. You'd be surprised that some of these kids would be able to have that natural instinct kick in, and they would come up with the solution on where they would want to go. But then the tabletop exercise, a small group discussion, walk through the scenario and the course of action, just like I talked about before, during, and after an emergency to lessen the impact on the school community. Functional training. 1 to 2 years, that is one of the questions. Functional exercises are designed to validate, evaluate capabilities, multiple functions, and or subfunctions or interdependent groups of the function. Functional exercises are typically focused on exercise and plans, policies, procedures, staff members involved in management, direction, command, and functional control functions. So this is just getting your exercises to validate all the capabilities of what you have for your emergency operations plan. Are these things going to work? We want you to try and do this every 1 to 2 years. It's basically, as you're going through your emergency operation plan, each year you're supposed to be going over this with your panel that is part of your school district on each one of these schools. So in meeting with the superintendent, you going over your operations plan, and you will be discussing these things. They allow the participants to practice their specific roles in an emergency situation. This type of exercise is conducted in a realistic, real-time simulated environment and is often utilized as a simulator, which is individuals that assist in the facilitation of the exercise, and follows a master scenario events list that dictates additional information, occurrences, and activities that affect the exercise. This is not having role players that are a full scale, which I'm getting ready to talk about. But this is something where you can be having something, a particular situation that you're going to work on, whether it's active shooter, bomb threat. Beginning of this past school year, we had those overseas bomb threats that were coming in. And so you were having to move kids to a particular part of the school and clear the school and make sure that everything was safe. Well, these are things that you can say that was part of your training, but you need to be able to do these things beforehand so you're not caught where you don't know or don't have a policy or a plan and policy in place. Full scale, we recommend these every 2 to 3 years. These exercises are the most time consuming in exercise continuum and are multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional efforts in which all resources are deployed. This type of exercise tests collaboration among the necessary agencies and participants, public information systems, communication systems, and equipment. This is a huge task. I do know of several states that actually require school districts, like our parishes, each school district has to do one per year. So 64 parishes, that would be a lot. But these are things that I know several districts do these. There are many that do not. And this is taking to where your emergency preparedness, your GOSEP office in your district, the person that's in your area, your emergency operations center, your EOC, get together and work out a scenario where you have actual role players, where people are actors, and the SWAT team, or the concept that is being taught in law enforcement is first one there enters and does the approach. Well, then you would actually, in a full scale, have this occur. It's a controlled environment. You send it out. Hey, we're to the local law enforcement. They're going to know, and then they would respond to the school that there is whatever the scenario, if it's an active shooter or a bomb threat, whatever scenario you want to do on the full scale, but you have role players there. Some even go into the point of getting makeup artists in simulated blood to look like people have been shot. But these are to increase the blood pressure and make this as realistic as possible. All right, getting near the end. School insecurity. I highly recommend this to all administration, to all teachers, to your superintendents, to whomever wants to get a better understanding. This I pulled off as a Audible book. When I travel, I like to listen to audiobooks. And so this is one that a good friend of mine recommended for me to listen to. And I want to pass on to all of you to do the same. It goes into, spells it out for everybody. And you can see on the thing, a comprehensive guide for parents and educators on school security, protecting your children, and fostering a safe learning environment. It goes into teaching on who is responsible for your school safety and security, how to talk to the school board and administration about security policy, most effective physical safeguards, or preventing an attack. It's about just under 4 hours. So I just highly recommend, if you want to have a better understanding and what needs to be done for your school to be safe, this is a phenomenal book for you to listen or read, whatever you want to do. These are the resources that I got a lot of my information from. And any questions? And going into questions, again, here's my information. Paul Toops, work at Louisiana State Police in the LaSafe section, our ISS. There's my cell. That is my work cell phone number. I don't give out an office number. We just moved offices, but I'm hardly in my office because I'm always out doing assessments. And again, here's my email address. And we will go back to questions. I will clear this out and see what we have.
Any questions for Paul? You can either put them in the chat or take yourself off of mute and ask a question.
Can he put his contact information back up on the screen?
I will
Oh,
put it in the chat.
Could you go back to the slide of the book, please?
Yes, ma'am. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to put my information.
The book information is in the chat.
Yeah, there is a link to that book in the chat. Let us know if you're not able to receive that or open it up.
Are y'all seeing the book?
We dropped it in the chat, Paul.
Okay, perfect.
Other questions? Okay, we dropped a link in the chat for you to evaluate the school site assessment session. So take a moment to do that, please.
And be gentle. Mike won't give me my pay raise if you are mean to him.
Somebody asked if you work for me, and no, he doesn't. So I can't pay you.
We can negotiate something.
Okay, I see no other questions. Thank you, Paul, for your time and your expertise. We really appreciate you being part of this team.
Thank you. And
Okay,
I'll stay on. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was just going to say we have about 10 more minutes before the next session. So we're going to build in a break right here. So take a break and we'll be back at 9:30. The development of emergency operations plans is a key factor in protecting schools. The School Safety Act requires the development of a school crisis management and response plan by the principal of each school, requires drills to rehearse the plan, and some reporting requirements for principals and school superintendents. Stevenson Disaster Management Institute, SDMI, has assisted schools locally in the development of crisis plans and is able to recommend some best practices for crisis planning teams. Joining us today from SDMI are Lauren Morgan and Brian Stevens. Mrs. Morgan has over 20 years of experience in emergency management and homeland security. As Associate Director of SDMI, she oversees all Institute projects and programs related to emergency management and homeland security and the team supporting them. She works alongside the SDMI Director and serves as the Institute liaison to clients on all projects involving technology integration / development of decision support tools. She has successfully developed emergency operations plans for several Southeast Louisiana parishes and oversees SDMI's EOP planning program and SDMI's school EOP planning program. Prior to joining LSU, Mrs. Stevens served as the Preparedness Section Chief at the Louisiana Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. Her time at GOSEP included responses to all major events from 2006 to 2012. Prior to GOSEP, Mrs. Stevens served as Operations Officer for the Southern Anti-Terrorist Regional Training Academy, providing counterterrorism training to hundreds of law enforcement personnel nationwide. Lauren is also a former lieutenant in the U.S. Army and is a certified master exercise practitioner through DHS FEMA. Mr. Stevens has over 30 years of experience in emergency management and homeland security. As Special Projects Manager at SDMI, Mr. Stevens serves as a lead project team member on all programs related to emergency management and homeland security. Prior to joining LSU, Mr. Stevens served as a logistics manager at the Department of Children and Family Services. As logistics manager, Mr. Stevens was responsible for shelter management and logistics. He retired as a lieutenant colonel from the Louisiana National Guard after 31 years of service. He is a former commander of Louisiana's 62nd CST WMD and CERFP, the state's highly specialized weapons of mass destruction unit and full-scale disaster response force. As commander of CST, LTC Stevens oversaw an annual budget of $4 million as well as $2 million in response and detection equipment. He began his career in emergency management in 2002 with Louisiana Office of Emergency Preparedness as a disaster recovery specialist. I'll turn it over to you, Lauren and Brian.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Mike, for that introduction. We're really happy to be here today and to have the opportunity to present again at the School Safety Summit. Before I get into actual emergency operations plans, I thought it would be beneficial to explain a little bit about what SDMI does, because we get that question a lot. A lot of people say, I didn't even know SDMI existed at LSU. So just for the group, we are a non-academic unit on LSU's campus that was founded following Hurricane Katrina by Emmett and Tony Stevenson. We are 100% self-funded through grants and contracts, and we actually don't receive any direct funding from LSU or the state of Louisiana. They're just kind of where we call home, and we're able to leverage capabilities here on campus for any of the projects that might come our way. The majority of our work is in Louisiana. We like to give back to the local communities, mostly local, state, private sector. And everything we do has some sort of component to emergency management and homeland security. We are a staff of complete practitioners. We like to call ourselves doers, but we do have a very small research staff that works with university faculty and other university partners on research initiatives. We've been fortunate enough to work with a number of schools in Louisiana, and that actually started in St. Bernard Parish. And since then, we've worked with UHI, and more recently, we started doing a lot of work with the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools at GOSEP. They're a huge partner of ours on a number of their initiatives. So I just wanted to give a quick background on what SDMI was and how we came to the emergency operations plans with schools. So I wanted to give you just a brief agenda for this morning. I'm not sure if we'll take up the full hour, but I'll do my best. These are the topics that we're going to go through, and Brian and I are going to kind of tag team this presentation. That way you don't have to listen to me for the entire hour. And we're just going to walk you through what an EOP is, that planning process, what it entails. And I know Paul touched on this earlier. We're actually going to get into those functional annexes and those hazard specific annexes that he talked about. They're part of his assessment. So it is really great that we followed Paul, because I feel like this just dovetails in perfectly to what he ended with. All right. What is an emergency operations plan, or what we like to call an EOP? I'm going to try and make this a very acronym-free zone. That's going to be hard for people like me and Brian, but we're going to do our best to spell everything out, common language, common terminology. But a lot of people might not necessarily know what an EOP is. You might refer to it as a crisis plan. They're essentially the same thing, but we're going to really lay out what makes an emergency operations plan different from your crisis plan. And just give this a minute to load. I have a short video for you. You know, what is an EOP? And what might it feel like as you and your planning team go through the process of gathering all the information you need, talking to all the appropriate stakeholders? Paul also kind of talked about that planning team that he wanted for his assessment. That's essentially the same planning team that you're going to want to write your EOP. In emergency management, we refer to this as herding cats. And let me make sure this video works. Hopefully it does.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Okay, just a little something. Just a little something to lighten up the presentation. Doing an EOP can sometimes feel like herding cats. We've done it a lot over here at SDMI, making sure you're including the right people, thinking of all the right things. It truly can feel like that sometimes. It can feel overwhelming. We've all been there. But let's talk about that planning process and what an emergency operations plan actually is. An emergency operations plan is a plan for managing a wide variety of potential threats, and the plan details, and this is underlined for a very important reason, who is responsible for carrying out specific actions. So who and the actions that they carry out. It's going to identify personnel, equipment, facilities, supplies, and all the other available resources that you have at hand, and how all those actions will be coordinated. Your current crisis plans, you're not reinventing the wheel when you're transitioning to an emergency operations plan. You're not changing your current procedures unless they need to be changed. And we're going to talk about when procedures do need to be changed, what that looks like later. You know, school EOPs are, I don't want to say a new thing, but transitioning them into this quote unquote formal emergency operations plan is a little bit newer. Parishes in Louisiana, they are all required to have emergency operations plans. Their plans follow this same format. It's what's called FEMA Comprehensive Planning Guidance 101. And CPG 101 provides that guidance on the fundamentals of planning and developing those emergency operations plans. That guidance can be found online. If you just Google CPG 101, FEMA, that planning guidance document will come up. I think as you look at this slide, one of the most important things for you to think about as you write your emergency operations plans for your campus is they're not scripts to be followed to the letter, right? Like you don't need to go to, your functional annex and make sure you're following it bullet by bullet by bullet. You want to make sure that these plans are flexible, they're adaptable to an actual situation, and is always going to be a living document that is meant to be flexible and meant to be changed at any time. Successful response operations occur when organizations, or in your case, schools, know their roles and understand how they fit into the overall plan and how they're able to execute the plan. So, like I said on the previous slide, y'all probably have an existing plan that's already in place, right? Everyone has those crisis plans. I've seen, oh my goodness, I think I saw 200 of them with all those grant applications that came in through LCSS. So I know you guys have them out there. They can be easily reformatted into a formal emergency operations plan. Don't let acronyms or that formal feeling about an emergency operations plan turn you off from taking the time to merge your current crisis plan into EOP format. These EOPs are just better in line with that formal response structure that is consistent with national response guidelines, and all first responders follow these guidelines. They're familiar with the structure, and when they show up to a critical incident, that's what their structure is set up under. So having your plan kind of nested in with that same structure is extremely helpful to the responding agencies to your campus. Updating your crisis plans to formal EOPs keeps all of your current procedures in place. It's just reformatted into a more functional and hazard-driven planning document. We're going to talk about those functional annexes and those hazard-specific annexes in a little bit. But migrating to a formal EOP really just allows your team and your campus to take a better look at what threats and hazards you have that you might not have thought about previously. And again, we'll talk about that a little later. So when you put together your EOP or your crisis plan, one of the most important parts of your emergency operations plan is incorporating this whole community concept into your planning process. I know Travis talked about this in his opening statement. It truly is the most critical piece of your EOP, and making sure that you're including all the right people. So what is that whole community planning approach? The whole community planning approach to emergency management, it hasn't been around very, very long. It was introduced by FEMA in, I want to say, 2011 or 2010. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that guidance document, it's the same as the CPG 101. Just Google whole community approach to emergency management, and the Google search should pop up that FEMA guidance document. If you would like to take the time to read the whole document, it's there. But when you think of whole community, think of it as just your guiding principle as you embark on your emergency operations planning process. You can see the graphic on this slide. Try to just visually show you what that whole community planning approach might mean for your school or for your campus or for your organization. Whole community engages all appropriate levels of leadership, community, and an individual when responding to a critical incident. With this approach, you're tapping into very different and specific knowledge bases, which is extremely important. If you look at this graphic, your local emergency management office has knowledge and expertise in a very specific area that's not necessarily the same as your local public safety or service departments. It's not the same as the students that you might have in your school. So this just really allows for a creative, collaborative planning team as you write your emergency operations plan so that nothing is left out. By following this approach, you're also strengthening relationships with first responders and personnel who may actually respond to your campus in the event of emergency or incident. And that's very important. Establishing those relationships, those agencies or departments knowing more about your campus, having been involved in the planning process, could really pay off in the future. All right. Paul mentioned this a little bit in his presentation, and now I just want to give you a summary or an overview of what that EOP structure looks like. EOPs can be written in a number of different formats. There's not just one way to do it, but schools should focus more on structuring yours in what's called the traditional functional format, and going to give you a quick peek at what that looks like. As you can see on your screen, that functional format, it's gonna act as a playbook or a guide for your events. It's gonna provide guidance to the different type of incidents you might face. Again, easily understandable, common terminology, common language. But like I talked about earlier, it just can be constantly updated as roles change or lessons are learned from drills or from actual incidents. Next slide. This is when we have assisted schools in the past. This is what that traditional functional format is going to look like, customized for a school setting. As you can see, the plan is broken into 6 main sections. That's your basic plan, which is at the top left up there. Concept of operations, logistics, admin, and finance, functional annexes, threat and hazard specific annexes, and then we've added to the schools that we've assisted an annex that just houses custom school templates, letters, forms. That might be where you're, keeping your drill logs, what your standard incident report form looks like. Anything that the school is wanting to add in that kind of end of the plan annex goes in that section. We're going to give you a brief summary of some of the more important sections today. We're not going to have time to go through all of them. First, your basic plan. This really is the piece that contains all your basic information. You can read that on the screen, but it's your call tree, your emergency contacts, your crisis team. Every year you should go in and add your bell schedule, your lunch schedules. This is also where we put a risk assessment and your threat and hazard profile, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, and your demographics. All this is extremely important for your crisis team, for your faculty, for your staff, but also for those responders that might come to your campus in the event of an emergency. Next, though, we're going to talk about the concept of operations section. And this is what makes an EOP really differ from your standard crisis plan. I'm going to let Brian take the mic, and he's going to give you a good explanation of this critical component and the establishment of the Incident Command System, ICS, for your school crisis plan.
Good morning. So what is NIMS ICS? It is basically a management concept that guides government, non-government organizations, private sector organizations, schools, etc., to work in emergency situations. It gets everybody on the same sheet of music and lets them speak the same language so that a school can talk to GOSEP or can talk to state police or talk to the sheriff's office, and everybody's speaking the same language and kind of knows what's going on. They all have they have a shared vocabulary. And they're sharing the same management system. Several of the concepts or the components of NIMS are preparedness. So under preparedness, you have planning, protocols, training, exercises, certifications. So to be prepared, you have to exercise, you have to train so that in case of an emergency, you aren't grabbing your EOP and flipping through pages and saying, what do we do? So preparedness is a huge component. You also have communications. Communications is key. That way, everybody has the same common operating picture and they all understand what's going on. Resource management is another component. That includes not just resources such as supplies, but it includes personnel, acquisition, tracking, reporting. That way you know who you have, you know what you have, you know what you've depleted and need to get more of, if you need more personnel or you need more supplies, things like that. And you have command and management. That's understanding the IC structure, the 3 organizational constructs, which is command system, multi-agency coordination, and public information. So basically, to sum it all up, it's a system that can get all agencies that are working together on one sheet of music and they all understand what's going on. Lauren, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Brian. So Brian just fire hosed you with a lot of things that you probably hadn't heard before. There are courses on ICS that any educator or individual can take. You can find those on FEMA's independent study website. 100, 200 level incident command system and 700 and 800 are great for administrators and for your crisis team. But I just wanted to give a better picture of, so Brian talked about that structure, which is on the left of your screen: incident commander, PIO, safety officer, liaison officer. And then you see how we translate it to a school EOP. A lot of you probably have a chart like this already in your crisis plan. All we're doing is taking that terminology and those branches or groups on the left, if you will, and spelling it out for your crisis team. You can see the incident commander, the school information center, operations, deputy IC, and it gives their overall responsibilities, which are very overarching, within your EOP. And then we give them an ICS org chart specific to their school as well, which you can see on the right. And I think that chart was done for a middle school. They selected the roles and the branches that were most applicable to them. This isn't hard to do. The whole ICS structure can sound a little bit scary. It just takes a little bit of time with the planning team to outline the who and the what. It really just, it takes time. But this covers most of the content from that concept of operations section of an EOP. If I were to refer back to that original outline, that's the second of the 6 sections. And next, we're going to take a look at the functional annexes piece. So again, you have your basic plan, you have your concept of operations, you have your admin, logistics, and finance. We're not going to talk about that today, but then next are your functional annexes. Functional annexes provide specific information and specific direction for emergency functions. When we talk about specific emergency functions, we're not necessarily directly correlating it to a hazard, because most functions can be used for multiple threats and hazards, right? Like, for example, let's just say a fire. You're going to evacuate, I hope. So the evacuation annex outlines that how function. It tells you how evacuation will happen with specific directions and information. That's one way you might evacuate. But what else might cause an evacuation? And I think Paul talked about this. What if you have a lab on campus that contains something and there's a leak or a problem in that lab? The hazard or threat doesn't matter. That evacuation function does. And that process is what you will always follow, and it's going to be the same way. You're going to evacuate the building for the most part in the same way the whole time. So each functional annex in your plan is going to describe these roles, describe these responsibilities to be carried out during and after an incident or an emergency. These annexes are pretty much the basis for all hazards emergency planning. It allows schools to deal with response-generated needs that are very common to most incidents or emergencies. Like I said, evacuation can be used for a number of different threats. The important thing to remember here, though, is each functional annex are outlining response-generated needs. You can see some of the most common functional annexes up on the screen. And these common functional annexes are not just found in school emergency operations plans. These are found in all emergency operations plans. Continuity of operations, parish level emergency operations plans have COOP annexes. Evacuation is a good example. You know, for a school, you might be evacuating a building or a campus, but a parish emergency operations plan might outline evacuation for an entire city or an entire jurisdiction due to a hurricane or a hazmat spill or a train derailment. So you can see what these basic annexes are. These are the real critical ones to have. Reunification obviously is unique to each school or location. Lockdown is as well. Shelter in place, reverse evacuation, mental health and healing. Recovery is another common functional annex that you might see. But this is just a good summary of what functional annexes are and what they might look like. And wanted to give you a quick overview of one of the functional annexes. This is a lockdown annex. This was done for a school that we worked with, and we worked with the principal, the district office, the local sheriff's department, the local OEP office on what type of lockdown made the most sense for their entire district. And this is kind of what they agreed was the best for their district. And all functional annexes, not just lockdown, are going to outline and specify what you can see at the top, a purpose. That's what the annex is for. Responsibilities, you can see that next. That's your who and your what. And then it's going to outline those actions to be taken. And that's your how. So those are your functional annexes, kind of going back to that outline in those 6 main sections: base plan, concept of operations, admin finance, functional annexes. Now we're going to talk about your threat and hazard specific annexes. These are chosen when we work with schools. We sit down with their crisis team and their planning team and any of the external stakeholders that they want included. And their threats and hazards are chosen by them. They know the environment, they know their location, they know their demographics. So these are always going to be extremely specific to that certain school, to that certain community, and to that certain neighborhood. And the planning measures are going to differ based off of all those characteristics. So when we sit down with that team and we look at the different types of hazards, you can see on the screen, there are generally 3 categories that we place those hazards into. That's your natural hazards. That's going to be your wintry weather, your tornadoes. Your technological hazards are going to be a hazmat spill or maybe some sort of a radiological event. And then obviously your human caused are going to be active threat, active shooter, a bomb threat, some sort of civil unrest event on your campus. Generally, those are incidents caused by people or individuals. So we sit down with that planning team. We look at each campus. We look at what infrastructure might be nearby and what might be concerning to a school. So we had a school recently that was right next to a levee, And on that levee, there was a very large plant that manufactured something. And that plant had barges that were constantly getting loaded or offloading. And that particular school was real concerned about what a barge accident, what impact that might have on campus, because it was so close to their exterior perimeter. So we really sit down and take the time with the team to talk through everything and anything that they believe they could be vulnerable to. We make sure we look at every single possibility so that that planning team can make the best decisions on what threats and hazards to include planning for. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Brian, who is going to talk about, so part of your plan, you need to prioritize these threats and hazards. This also is going to help the planning team determine what should be included on their plan based on what risk level it's at. So Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. So like Lauren said, all schools are going to have threats. Each school will have different threats. Each school will have some of the same threats as other schools. Like all schools will have weather threats. Some may be tornadoes, some may be severe thunderstorms or flash floods, but each school has to sit down and look at their own individual threats and hazards. So how do you do that? You conduct a risk assessment. So use a chart like this to determine high risk, moderate risk, critical risk. The military uses this every day for every single aspect of training or exercises. If you're going to the rifle range or you're doing a convoy, something like that, you sit down, you identify each risk associated with each threat. And then you go through, you categorize it, and then you think, well, how do we reduce this? What steps do we take to reduce this threat? What steps would we take to reduce injuries during a tornado? So you would go through your tornado drill. So it makes you think about and recognize the hazards and then take steps to minimize the risk. So if we can go to the next slide. So here, this is a sample risk assessment. After you meet with the planning team, you create documents similar to this, so you know where your threats are. So for instance, on here, you have a high threat of tornadoes in this example. So you know that's something you have to worry about. How do you deal with it? How do you minimize that risk and possibly take it from a critical risk to a high risk or a lower risk? You also, same chart, you have a lost child. That's a high risk. So what steps do you do to minimize that? What steps do you take to keep accountability? And then you also, I'll use hazmat. Well, that's a moderate or low risk, but you never know, you might have a vehicle accident where a hazmat truck turns over or something to that effect where you have a hazmat leak. So even though it's a low risk, you have to plan for it and have an alternative, or have an option of what to do in case of that event. So now that we've shown you a few sections of the school's operation plan, we're going to move on to custom templates, letters, and forms. Lauren, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, and I'll add a little something about this particular risk assessment. What you'll find is the risk category, the risk column on the right. That critical, it's gonna change too, whether it's middle school or an elementary school versus a high school, because there are certain threats that are just elevated as the students get older and you get to that high school level. Some of the threats that might have just been moderate in an elementary school might be a high risk in a high school. So we look at all that as well. I can't remember what school this was for, but if you look on the screen, you can see in parentheses next to cyber attack and transportation and bus incident, you see the words district. That was because the district decided that they wanted to own that threat. Because if there was a cyber attack or a transportation bus incident to any of the schools within their district, that was on them to plan for that particular threat or hazard and not necessarily the individual schools. So that's important to note too. And this is going to be different for every district and for every school that has a risk assessment within their emergency operations plan. So that is, you know, your emergency operations plan in a real quick overview, a very high overview of what they look like. So Paul talked about this a little bit too, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So now let's just say we have put together your entire emergency operations plan. Now what? What do? You don't want to put it on the shelf and say, I'm just going to look at this next August. I don't want to deal with it right now. Let's look at next steps once you've completed your plan and what you should be thinking about for the 2024-2025 school year. So on top of exercising, you want to review your emergency operations plan every single year. And it shouldn't just be done every single year. It should also be done if you have a particular emergency or incident or some sort of gap or area of concern shows up in an exercise or drill. Those are things you want to think about as you go to update your crisis plan or your emergency operations plan. Some things to think about here on your screen: has the risk to your community or campus changed with evolving threats or hazards? You know, did a new plant get constructed, you know, within a certain planning zone that now you're concerned about? That would be your infrastructure as well. You know, Paul talked about those different physical security measures that you can take on campus. Have you made enhancements in the last year? What have you done to harden, you know, certain areas of campus? Or have you put in new camera systems? Have you put in new card swipes? All of this is going to have an impact on your vulnerabilities that are listed in your EOP. And also, you know, do you have local resources available that you might not have had the year prior? So every year you should really look at your plan and go through a checklist of what, you know, you need to update. And it's just a simple checklist. You know, update your phone trees, update schedules, update your crisis team. And then a review of your specific annexes for your functional annexes and your hazard and specific annexes. And I'm going to show you just an example of what that checklist might look like, just to make it a little bit easier for you. When we work with schools and when I work with parishes, we do a very quick checklist. You can see that on the left-hand side of your screen. It's just a annual update guide. It's going to tell you what section of the plan to go to and what parts you want to look at to update. This makes it super easy, so you're not flipping through an 80-page plan and trying to figure out what you want to update. We actually give them exactly what they should look at every year. And then within your emergency operations plan, in the base plan section, that's that first main section, you have a record of changes. Make sure that you record any changes to your EOP on this page. Something as simple as, you know, we completed an active shooter drill and found this deficiency, and we wanted to make changes to our lockdown procedures. You want to annotate that on your record of changes so that you have a really good running log of what you've changed within that plan. All right, so that's updating your plan. Now we're going to talk about how I hate to see plans sit on shelves. Updating your plan is important, but so is testing it. It is the most important part of this whole process. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Those are your easy drills. You know, simulations of emergency situations or exercises and drills are such a critical part of your school preparedness. They offer a huge opportunity to practice those, you know, specific courses of action and roles and responsibilities. of your crisis team, of your faculty, of your staff, of your students, if you're involving them. I like to advise people, crawl, walk, run. Paul mentioned those full-scale exercises. I do not recommend doing those on day one. You want to crawl, walk, run. You know, start with an orientation of your plan to your staff and to your crisis planning team. Then, like he talked about, those tabletop exercises, get your staff around the table and talk about a certain scenario that you might be concerned about. Then you can move into drills. You know, these are your fire drills, your evacuation drills. And then when you feel comfortable enough with your plan, you can go into that full scale exercise mode. There are real benefits to doing this. I know many of you use Rave or Raptor or other sort of panic buttons in your school. You know, if it's a new technology, you want to test it, right? You don't want to wait to see if it works on the day that you need to use it. So that's part of exercising, is testing those new technologies and capabilities. It gives you the opportunity to find areas of improvement, but it also gives you the opportunity to see what you're doing really well and let your faculty and staff and your students know that. Tell them, you know, we did this exercise and we cut 30 seconds off of our evacuation time of the whole school. So it gives you both. It gives you the opportunity to identify areas you might need to improve, but also this is what we're doing really, really good at. And it also just gives you the opportunity to familiarize your entire campus community with your procedures in a low stress environment. And I have another video to show you. Just give it a minute to load. Looking at the time, I have 15 minutes left. I might need to speed it up. We might not watch the whole video, but this is a longer video clip. We like this video because it is truly a good example of not properly training your staff or your students on a regular basis. It's called Dangerous Conformity. And it's actually from a really long time ago. You'll probably be able to tell from the hairstyles and the clothing that you're going to see. Without giving too much away though, while you're watching this, think about being in a situation where emergency is unfolding. If an individual is alone and they notice the emergency, that individual is solely responsible for coping with that incident and that individual only. If someone is surrounded by others, an individual might feel that them taking responsibility for a certain action is lessened, possibly making them less likely to make a decision. So let's watch this video. And like I said, I'm running a little short on time, so I might have to cut it short.
It's obvious that we don't intervene in many kind of emergency situations because there's too great a risk to our life or limb. But now what happens when you're in a situation where if you don't act, there could be a risk to your life? Imagine you're in a room and a smoke alarm goes off, smoke is pouring out from under the door. And if you don't leave that room quickly, a fire could erupt and you could be suffocated or burned to death. It's obvious what you do. But now, again, what happens if you're in that same room and there are 10 other people and all of them do nothing? Do you take action when other people define the situation as do nothing rather than do something? When your life is at stake by following the herd.
Behaving differently from your group can make you an outcast. But what would you do if you knew your group was entirely wrong? Would you, for example, sit in a burning room just because everyone else does? This hotel conference suite has been prepared for a focus group discussion on internet shopping. But all is not as it seems. We've been busy. The place is rigged with 4 hidden cameras and 6 concealed microphones. And psychology professor Dominic Abrams is watching from our control room, which we've built in an adjoining suite.
Now it's just a question of sitting and waiting. Right, so this is a questionnaire all about kind of shopping habits and everything here. So just move that off your chair.
Our first participant is Mary Mizuno, a London student who thinks she's arrived early. What she doesn't know is that behind this door, there's about to be a serious fire in the hotel kitchen. Or at least the illusion of one, created by a smoke machine and some sound effects. What will she do?
She's now noticed the smoke and is concerned. At this point, she decides to investigate to find out what's going on. She's immediately taken responsibility for figuring out what to do.
Mary does the sensible thing and evacuates quickly. She even leaves her bag and coat.
As I've never been in a fire situation before, I tried to remember the kind of things that you're supposed to do, so I left my stuff and just went out.
But Mary was on her own. This time, we've planted 7 actors who are all in on the experiment. We've said to them, when you see the smoke, do nothing. Our second participant is Lauren Heffernan, also a student. What will she do?
In this situation, she'll be following a script. The script is partly written in her mind. It's a script which is borrowed from things like sitting exams. Most situations like this have some element of expected or scripted behavior.
I want everyone to look. They're going to put a clock on the video screen. And Mary, good old Mary, before this one, did the right thing. She maybe shouldn't have gone to the door to investigate. She probably should have just got out. But take a look at the clock once it starts ticking.
But what will happen to her script when we make a slightly unusual situation very unusual? Nothing to start with, so we get her attention. Now, how long before she dashes out of the room?
She's checking increasingly to see what the other people are thinking. But who can she appeal to? The answer is nobody. She turns to the norm of the group. Ignore the smoke. In a real fire, the people in this group would be in very serious danger by now.
I was looking for some sort of reaction from someone else, even just the slightest little thing, that they'd recognise that there was something, going on here. For me to kind of react on that and then do something about it, I kind of needed prodding.
She's waiting for someone else to react. Why isn't anyone else reacting? She feels uncomfortable. She doesn't want to embarrass herself by taking the lead, taking action. But something is definitely wrong.
Lauren stayed in the room for 20 minutes after spotting the smoke.
20 minutes it took this person to make a decision with all of those other people in the room. You do not want your staff, your faculty, or your students to be this person. And in the interest of time, because I'm going to run out, I'm going to fast forward the rest of the video, but it repeats the same thing. When people are in a group and if they start to follow that herd mentality and nobody is making a decision or nobody has the confidence to make a decision, it might not end in a very good way. This is called, the video is Dangerous Conformity. Again, if you want to watch the whole thing, you can get on YouTube and find it. It's also referred to as the smoky room experiment. And I want to say the first one was actually done in the 1960s. And so I believe we've come a real long way. I don't think in today's age that someone would sit in a smoky room for 20 minutes, but you never know if you aren't. Let me fast forward this video so I can get to the next slide. If you aren't, exercising and training and instilling that confidence in your emergency operations plan to your faculty and your staff, it's just so important to take the time to drill and exercise. That video truly tested potential behaviors by placing individuals in that fake emergency situation. Just don't let your staff be this experiment. give them the tools, give them the training, give them what they need to feel confident and comfortable in their decisions when they're following those emergency actions. And this is done through repeated drills and exercise. And they don't have to take a long time. And just always remember, your faculty and your staff are your first line of defense, and they're going to be that first line of decision making for anyone in the immediate area. If something unfolds on your campus, and the same can be said for older students. You know, what if you're at a high school and there's a group of older students standing around and there's not faculty and staff? Including them in the drills and exercises is important too, so that they're familiar with the policies, they're familiar with the procedures. Anybody that could be potentially someone to have to make that first decision, you want to make sure you're giving them the opportunity to train and exercises. And again, exercises don't have to be hours long or days long or take months to plan. You can do a 15-minute scenario-based tabletop discussion with your crisis team, with your staff, with student leadership. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's not hard. Exercising your plan is truly easy, and it's going to give your staff and students the confidence that they need on your campus to make good decisions on all emergency situations. Going to speed up a little bit here. So drills and exercises are great, right? Having your EOP is great, right? But we like to be extra too. You want to be extra prepared. This is just a sample of when we went and did St. Bernard Parish. They got custom EOPs for every school and the entire district, but then they also asked for miniature faculty staff emergency procedures guides for them to have, for each faculty member to have easily accessible on their desktop. So we created that for them. That's an easy win to give your faculty and staff the procedures that are part of your emergency operations plan. They don't need the full EOP. Your crisis team and your administrators are really the only ones, and your local stakeholders are the ones that need that full EOP. But it's nice to have give your staff something too that they can flip through, they can familiarize themselves with. They also asked us for a parent emergency guide. This was not IDEA, this was theirs. I kind of refer to it as sending out your annual State of the Union of your school. And here are the things that you might have changed over the last year. Maybe you changed your reunification plan. You can talk about maybe what security measures you implemented over the summer. Just a real good opportunity for you to communicate with parents as well. They also got a PowerPoint that the staff could go through that familiarized them to the emergency procedures. They got that annual update guide and checklist. And then we also created a custom application for them, which housed all of these items. So I want to toot some horns of some schools that we've worked with that have just been an absolute pleasure to do work with. And I like to show examples of people who worked really, really hard to enhance their school safety programs. St. Bernard Parish truly took a whole community approach. I want you to look at this picture. It's not just the superintendent sitting in the middle that spearheaded. She was the true champion of this project and and you'll see the project in the next slide, but she included everybody: parish administrators, fire, OEP, that's the Office of Emergency Preparedness and Homeland Security, the Sheriff's Department, the local parish council. And the culmination of the whole project was at the parish council meeting where they formally adopted their emergency operations plan for the district and each campus. And this just kind of gives you a really brief overview of the timeline that they took. And it shows you to that whole community approach, the relationships they had, and really, this was a marathon for them. It was not a sprint. They started, as you can see, in 2018. Their relationships within the whole community. They had a great relationship with the parish OHSCP director, and they were talking about enhanced floor plans for tactical responses for their school safety program. The OHSCP had some money that they were able to share with the school to help with this project. And this project of the tactical floor plans literally brought in everybody from the community to walk through this. And it resulted in dozens of custom detailed floor plans for the district, for every campus, and they're accessible to every responder in St. Bernard Parish if they were to have an emergency. Then they were trained on all of it too. Fast forward to 2021, we received a call from them again about updating their crisis plans and turning them into formal EOPs. So in 2021, we started that process. We did all of their schools. And then, as I said, we had a capstone kind of event where it was signed by each and every person that was deemed a stakeholder. You can see that on the left who signed their plans, and you can see up there we did their 12 campuses, and then we did a district plan as well. The next school we worked with, who I feel did such an incredible job, is the lab school. I hold this close to my heart. I have a daughter that is about to be a senior at the lab school, and Director Kevin George reached out and said, "Hey, we'd like to change our current crisis plan to a formal EOP." We did that for them. It included a new threat and risk assessment, ICS structure, and included all the appropriate stakeholders. We had meetings with Paul. I was there for the site assessment that he did at lab school. LSU Emergency Management, LSU PD. He truly had, with his office administration team, Ms. Creel and Mr. Piku, everybody was part of this process, and that is what is going to make your EOP update a success, is that whole community planning team. He also did a parent guide and a staff guide. He had us come in and actually train his staff on the emergency procedures guide and explain to them their revamped emergency operations plan. I know they also recently applied for a grant award and they got it, so that's great. But the number one reason for success for St. Bernard Parish and for UHI was they had a champion, and that person took the bull by the horns. They led the planning team, they were invested in it, and they knew the importance of it. I'm almost to the end here and I'm almost out of time. So I also just wanted to share a couple of resources with you. If you haven't looked at these are great resources to have. It's how to develop an EOP for your school, and then how to develop an EOP for a district. And then obviously the Louisiana Center for Safe Schools, their website has a resources tab. We're a huge partner with them, and just wanted to kind of drop that in there. And I have finished, and here's our contact information. Do not hesitate to contact us via email if you have any questions. And Mike, I am finished with 2 minutes to spare.
Nice job. Nice job. Great. We'll open it up for questions. If there are any questions in the chat, or if you want to come off of mute and ask a question, we're close to the end, but that's okay. Let's answer questions if we can.
Good morning, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Not really a question, just a comment. I appreciate the fact that Lauren was able to, I guess, provide some guidance and enter the risk assessment and vulnerability assessments into the conversation for these emergency operation plans. We've spent a good amount of time focused on security assessments, but to understand what's most likely and what's most dangerous are relevant components to the conversation. And so growing in that capability to be able to address those concerns within our communities is going to be allow us to move forward leaps and bounds with our preparedness and resiliency. So thank you for that, Lauren.
Yeah, no problem, Travis. And again, if schools have questions about that, they can feel free to email us.
Hi, I have two questions. The first question is the presentations, will they be shared, or could we get copies of those presentations?
Yes, we will provide that information at the end of day one, where you can find the presentations. They will be provided with the recordings.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Second question is there a guide or a like template for the parent plans?
That
parent
is
emergencies.
that's an excellent question. We get that a lot. So I don't want to say anything on behalf of Travis and his center, but we have been working on just very generic templates for the center to have and use and put where they want to put them and allow others to use them at some point. We're not there yet, but we are working towards that. I don't know if Travis or anyone from the center wants to speak more accurately. We don't have any on our website though. What we do for our projects is the schools then own those templates.
So in short, we have national templates. We are working to customize something specific for the state of Louisiana, and it's not available at the moment. There are different levels of refinement. However, with the continued engagement with our local school districts, we hope to have that made available for early spring of next year.
Thank you, Travis. Okay, great. You will see an evaluation in the chat for this last session. Key point that Lauren mentioned is to have a champion, which is so important in this process. And she also mentioned take the time to drill and exercise, and that's a good segue into our next session. But give us a moment to make sure we're prepared for the next session. Thank you, Lauren and Brian. Appreciate your effort today.
Thanks, Mike.